One of the questions you might ask is when it comes to AI, why are we using Python and not some other low-level language like C, Go, Rust, assembly? Why aren't we using those low-level, super fast language? Well, that's a great question. So I'll get a little help in the answer today. So I'm going to choose one of my AI platforms here. I like Gemini at the moment. They kind of go back and forth for which ones I like the most. But if I'd asked Gemini, I said, hey, what do I need to write a deep learning program? So I go ahead, I ask Gemini, I say, hey, what do I need? And it's going to tell me. So I say, okay, here's what you need to write it. And it comes out, it says key requirements. Well, you need to understand, you need network, you need active. Wow, a lot of stuff here. Software, programming language, Python. So there we go, we mentioned this Python. We need a deep learning framework that we go ahead that we're going to use in this process. So I'm going to ask it to go ahead and write a short program in Python. Say, hey, write a short Python, and it mentioned the deep learning framework, PyTorch. So I'm going to go ahead and ask it to write a short program, and it will do that. So it's analyzed this, it looks at my question, it breaks it down, has a large language model, and figures out what to do. And it starts to write some code here. Now, we're not going to worry too much about that. The import torch stuff, that's actually grabbing the torch library, the PyTorch library. And so it tells me some of the things it's doing here. It says, here's an example, or it goes through and I say, okay, not a horribly exciting example, but let's ask it. In that particular example, how many lines of code? So I go ahead and ask how many lines of code, and in this case, 17 lines of code. So that AI program, that kind of front end, is going to go ahead and do a linear regression. It's 17 lines of code. And that was written in Python. So let's go ahead, let's take a think about that. We have 17 lines of code in Python, but we use something called PyTorch. So what I wonder is, how many lines of code in PyTorch? So I go ahead and ask, it says there's about 220,000 lines of code in PyTorch. So our little program had 17 lines, but there's 220,000 lines of code in PyTorch. So our front end is Python and our back end in this case is PyTorch. So we can go ahead and we can ask it questions. We can go ahead and ask it questions like, what language is the PyTorch backend, not our front end, written in? So I'm going to ask it what language it's written in. And so it's going to think for a second. We'll go watch over here. Let's see what it's going over here. It's thinking. It says PyTorch is primarily written in C++. Let's ask this guy. This guy seemed pretty smart. We'll ask Gemini. In Gemini, we asked it the same question, and it's going to come back and it's going to tell us, and give us a little bit more detail here, is PyTorch is written in C++, a very low-level language, along with some CUDA code. Python's for the front end. That's the 17 lines of code that we wrote. But it chooses C++ and CUDA to get that low-level high performance. So in our case, if you think about our program, we have approximately 220,000 lines of C++, and so our program is 99.99% C++ and 0.00 whatever percent Python. So just kind of keep that in mind. Python is the front end. It's the steering wheel that drives the car. It is not the engine that makes it go. These low-level libraries written in C++ using NVIDIA's CUDA library. Also, some of them are written in Go. We are simply using Python as the front end to talk to that incredibly powerful engine written in C++. Thank you.